Good morning. I'm Matthew Johnson, a senior minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Rockford, Illinois, and it is great to worship with you. Whether you are joining us live at 10 Central Time on June 14th, 2020, or later today, tomorrow, another week, welcome. Whether you're a member or a friend of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Rockford or of another Unitarian Universalist congregation who's found your way here because you need worship today, or if you're exploring religion anew and have found us, welcome. Whether you are frightened or grieving or determined or outraged or curious or sad or furious, whether you are enjoying the beautiful day or weeping tears of sorrow and rage, or both at once, welcome. Whoever you are and whatever brings you here, welcome. We're coming to you from the sanctuary at the church. With me today is Tim Anderson, my colleague in worship and the music director here at the church. This is Tim's last Sunday before his summer vacation, and we will miss him over the rest of June and July and early August, and then he'll be back with us. And our regular summer musicians will step in to fill in and play in over the next 8 weeks. Lindsay Dunn, our Director of Religious Education, is off to my right, and you'll see her in a moment. Autumn Powell, our office manager, is in the back of the hall running the technology for us today. Our worship associate, Nikki Tickner, has pre-recorded her testimony, which you'll hear later in the service. Chris Ainsworth, our membership coordinator, is at home and chiming in on the Facebook feed, and we welcome you in the feed to comment, tell us that you are here, say good morning, say hello. When we get to the prayer in the service, lift up the names of those you are holding in your heart, near or far today. Be present with us in our conversation. Remember to be thoughtful about what you post and what you share. It is public. If you prefer not to be distracted, you can turn comments off. You look up quiet mode if you want to know how to do that. We have a ritual of how we worship during this time, which is a source of comfort and connection for us. It is for me, and you have said it is for you too. So we worship in our way and with our habits, our liturgy, our ritual, to ground us and remind us of who we are and whose we are. So I will ring the bell, and we will worship together. We will begin with singing. Tim will play and sing, and we invite you to sing along at home. We put the words up on the screen, and we hope that you will sing lustily and loudly in your own home or wherever you are this morning. We'll begin with singing hymn 112, Do You Hear?
From the place where you stand to the outermost strand, do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear, do you hear? All the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers, they are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear, do you hear?
I'm so glad that you are here for worship. If today is your first time worshiping with us, we're especially happy to have you online. Please do take a moment to like the page as a way to stay in touch. And you can also go to uurockford.org, click on newsletter, sign up, find out more about us there. And there's a visitor form which Chris has posted into the feed you can fill out to let us know who you are. We look forward to when we can begin to gather again in person. We'll begin with small groups and other kinds of safer activities, and look forward to when we can be together, when it is safe for all of us. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith, a beacon of truth and a fire for justice and a warmth for the soul. If you've got a chalice at home or a candle at home, we invite you to light that as Lindsay lights our chalice here at the church. We'll speak together the covenant of our church. Love is the spirit of this church, and reason is its guide. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to serve human need. This is our covenant. Now, let's sing together our chalice response song.
May love shine forth through us today. May light of reason guide our way. May beauty, truth, and joy become a flame that burns in everyone.
We gather for worship. I invite you to breathe in and breathe out. I tell you, friends, that I miss you. I miss the folks being in this sanctuary together where I can see your faces and hear your responses, the shuffling of paper and the clearing of throats. I miss the way in which we sing together, some loudly and some quietly. I miss the under the breath grumbling when we invite you into a round, and yet then we sing together and it's beautiful. I miss seeing your faces as you come in and as you go out. And I miss you seeing each other, responding to each other, noticing each other's faces and bodies and presence. This thing we're doing as well as we can, but it's hard. It's hard to not be together, to be one body, to breathe together, to learn together in one place, to touch base, to reconnect and to recenter. It's hard. And it's not just in the church, it's in life. We went down the road of the kids getting technology to do their schoolwork or so that we could work. And now we think, can we pull that back to be together? How? Forgot how to go out and be about. Finding out how to live again, which is a privilege not all of us are afforded. This morning as we gather, and it's a beautiful day in northern Illinois, and 117,000 people and counting have died of COVID-19 in the United States, and millions more around the world are sick. We gather, and it's a beautiful day in this part of the world, and people murdered, sleeping in their cars by the police, who are supposed to keep people safe and don't. It's a beautiful day in this part of the world, and we weep tears of rage and injustice, and we're confused about what to do and how to live and what's next. It's a beautiful day in this part of the world. And sorrow and grief are with us. Some of us mourn our beloveds, our parents, our partners, who we miss, who have died, whose memory we hope will be a blessing, but we are sad. It's a beautiful day in this part of the world, and joy and sorrow are woven fine. And so I invite you to breathe, to be present, to breathe in and out, to begin and end with love, for that is who we are and who we are called to be. Let us worship together.
Be thou with us now and always, now and always. Blessed be.
Good morning, I'm Lindsay, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Our story this morning is Let the Children March by Monica Clark Robinson. This is a true story of the Children's March, and what we see now is that the work continues, even all these years later, and the work is ours to do. 1963, Birmingham, Alabama. I couldn't play on the same playground as the white kids. I couldn't go to their schools. I couldn't drink from their water fountains. There were so many things I couldn't do. One warm spring night, my family went to church. We weren't there to have regular services. We were there to hear Dr. King speak. We were there to plan. He wanted to raise an army of peaceful protesters to fight for freedom. His brown eyes flashing fire and love, Dr. King told us the time had come to march. If I march, Mama said, I'll lose my job, sure enough. I can't march, Daddy said. I got a family to feed. The weight of the world rested on our parents' shoulders, but this burden, this time, did not have to be theirs to bear. I don't have a boss to fear, my brother said, or a job to lose. We can march this time. We'll be Dr. King's army, I said. I'll be fine, Daddy, I promised. Don't worry, Mama. Dr. King didn't like children being put in harm's way. He was a daddy too, after all. But he said that though we were young, we were not too young to want our freedom. Let the children march. They will lead the way. On May 2nd, a sunny Thursday, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, cousins and friends, we all met at the church dressed in our best, feet ready. In a silence so loud that all I could hear was my racing heart, we began to walk. Hand in hand we marched, so frightened, yet certain of what was right for freedom. The path may be long and troubled, but I'm going to walk on. Would I be hurt? Would we be heard? Would it all be worth it in the end? I wanted to run from the angry faces in the crowd, from the danger, run from the fear. Boys and girls, brothers and sisters, cousins and friends, on we marched. We marched, we marched. Singing the songs of freedom, 1,000 strong we came. Hate dogged my heels all that day, its yellowed canine teeth sharp, but courage walked by my side and kept me going. Disperse or you'll be jailed, the police shouted the first day. Disperse or you'll get wet, the police shouted the second day. Disperse or we'll release the dogs, the police shouted the third day. We did not disperse. We kept on marching. We wouldn't stop until things started to change. Hundreds of us went to jail on the first day, and even more on the second. My turn wasn't until the third day. After I was sprayed by water stronger than anything I've ever felt, rough hands pushed me forward, and I fell to my knees in the police wagon. I was going to jail. Dr. King reassured our parents. Don't worry about your children, he said. They're going to be all right. Don't hold them back if they want to go to jail, for they are doing a job for not only themselves, but for all of America and for all of mankind. That night, crowded into a cell too small for even half of the kids, we sang, "We shall overcome, ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, and freedom is coming." Our parents couldn't be there with us, but still we sang, wrapped in the proud and loving arms of our ancestors. I was still in jail, but we heard the next day and the next, more kids marched. The water hoses they used to sting us could not stop our fierce tide. The path may be long and troubled, but I'm gonna walk on. Turn the other cheek, we had been taught. Show love where there is hate. The world watched as hate bruised us, but for 7 days we walked only in love. The jails swelled to bursting, and even President Kennedy took notice. Daddy said the president received letters and calls about us from all over the world. Our march would become a memory, a small part of a large story, but we had been heard, and the seeds of revolution were sown. 2 days and nights I stayed in the jail. Some stayed even longer. When I left, I was tired and sore, and my best dress was ripped, but my smile was as wide as the Mississippi River. I had made a difference. I'm so proud of you, baby girl, Mama said. Your march was what made them see. With nothing more than our feet, voices, and courage, we had done what others could not. Change was right around the corner. We felt it like a cool breeze in an Alabama August. On May 10th, the great news rang out. Dr. King had reached an agreement with the white leaders of the city. Desegregation would begin. 1 month later, I was playing on a playground I'd never been allowed to play on before. 2 months later, my family ate at a diner we'd never been allowed to eat in before. Our march made the difference, and we children led the way. Singing the songs of freedom, 1,000 strong, we came.
Thank you, Lindsay. Here's where we're at as a congregation. We will continue to worship online and will for the foreseeable future. The board and leaders will be discussing as Phase 4 enters here in Illinois, likely soon, what we can do to be safe. We're encouraged to see that the state and its tight restrictions has had the largest decrease in cases over the last few weeks, and we want to play our part to keep our own folks and our whole community safe. We do have a variety of upcoming events. We're trying to do a wonderful Wednesday every Wednesday at 7 o'clock, and I would love for more folks to join those conversations. We've been having great conversations and love to see more of you log on from the comfort of your own home and be part of those. This coming Wednesday is the first in two-part, and there's a week in between. The first two-part of the UU the Vote, our own leaders in the UU the Vote effort to talk about how to do deep engagement with voters ahead of November's election, so important. We'll be presenting and talking about their work, so that's 7 o'clock Wednesday. Coffee hour will begin after the service today and give us about 5 minutes after we're done, and we would love to have you with us for that. And the meeting ID will be up on the screen in a moment with the offering. It's the same as we're always using for those two events, same meeting ID. Encourage you to check in with each other. If you're thinking of someone you usually see at coffee hour, call them up, send a note, reach out to people. Please reach out to me if you need anything. If you're a member of a church and you've been laid off or lost tip or gig income, need support in any way, please let me know. Folks have been generous with their offerings of help and not as generous with asking. It's very Midwestern of you all. So please let me know if there's something we can do to help you out. Every week we take up an offering to support the work of justice and mercy in the world. 80% of what we collect today will go to Rockford New Hope, which is an organization working with congregations and others to redevelop parts of town and to help folks keep their properties looking good and do a variety of other programs. They're working closely with Rockford Urban Ministries as that program enters a transition in its space use, and so we want to offer our support to them. Thank you for your generosity. And you can give online by texting the number that'll be on the screen or by going to urockford.org/donate and select Share the Plate if that's what you want to give to. Select a different fund if you're planning to give there. If you're in the habit of making your gifts toward the operating budget in person, be sure to either send in a check or to make that gift online. Our fiscal year ends here at the end of June, and we hope that everybody who hasn't already completed their gift will do so in the next 3 weeks. And thank you very much to those of you who have. It's deeply inspiring to me and to our staff to see all of you who are supporting the congregation in these times and in all times. This Sunday for the offering, Tim is going to play a song most of you will recognize the tune, Blackbird. And some of you know the story, others of you don't. Inspired by the civil rights movement, the kind of marches that Lindsay's story that she just read was about. The Beatles wrote this song in wanting to offer their support for the beauty of the struggle for justice and the dignity of each person singing for justice. The offering will now be given and received.
Good morning, everybody. So when reading the topic for today's service in the Kairos, it felt a little too relatable to our current state of world affairs. I felt jumbled about what direction to take, what I wanted to say about how today's topic related to me. But when feeling jumbled, I coped by looking for more information, hoping to find direction about where to go. So in this case, I decided to Google the book reference, The Banality of Evil, and was left feeling more jumbled than before. So rather than find a way to try to tie all of this together, I decided to give you all a little glimpse into the jumble. So here in no particular order are some of the things this topic brings to mind for me. The famous experiment that anyone who has taken even a basic psychology class has probably heard about, the Milgram experiment, where participants' adherence to authority and direction was tested by making them believe they were administering painful and possibly lethal electric shocks to a stranger. If I were a subject of this experiment, what would I do? I just finished reading both 1984 by George Orwell and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne. These stories, combined with the story of The Handmaid's Tale, get me thinking about power and authority, oppression, and who decides whom is more deserving than another based on arbitrary and ever-changing rules and targets. Those beneath are never able to rise above, and the system is carefully crafted that way. Do you accept it or do you fight it? Who would I be? What side of the fence would I be on? What character am I in dystopian America? And then there's Facebook. Oh, Facebook. Both my greatest source of information and frustration. I want to break up with it. I really do. I did it before, and I'll do it someday again, but just not now. Facebook can be a great source of stress to somebody like me, a deep thinker full of empathy, and to a fault at times. I'm a sponge waiting to soak up all the information and feelings. Every day I am struck and still surprised by the lack of empathy, compassion, or frankly just plain critical thinking and common sense skills on display in my newsfeed. Usually it's in the comments of stories and posts, which is why they say don't ever read the comments, but it distresses me. It's so much all or nothing, black and white thinking. The polarization of every issue, the inability to examine both sides, to see different perspectives, to understand how life experiences shape our thoughts and beliefs. Mainly our refusal to start with what we have in common and move together, versus our tendency to focus on where we disagree and lock in. Much of the time I don't engage for many reasons, but mostly because I feel like my energy and power can be put to use more effectively elsewhere. Quite often I view Facebook as the cheap seats, as in the loudest boos come from the cheapest seats. But that's not to say I don't type and delete responses and posts, or at times weigh the pros and cons of engaging when I feel like I just can't let something go. But much of the time I just simmer and stew and screenshot and move on. Then I wonder, if you think and you question and you empathize, but you don't verbalize, what happens then?
Thank you, Nikki. Such great, important questions for us to wrestle with that we're going to talk about today. We're going to sing together a song about waking up and paying attention. Wake now, my senses, and we're going to sing the first 4 verses of this song. So we'll put the words up on the screen. Sing along with Tim at home.
Wake now, my senses, and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow, giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now, my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now, my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race.
Two readings this morning. The first is an excerpt from this book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil by Hannah Arendt. This section, she describes Adolf Eichmann after reviewing the materials about him and the text of the police examinations and other materials. The German text of the taped police examination conducted from the 29th of May, 1960 to the 17th of January, 1961, each page corrected and approved by Eichmann, constitutes a veritable goldmine for a psychologist, provided he is wise enough to understand that the horrible can not only be ludicrous, but outright funny. Some of the comedy cannot be conveyed in English because it lies in Eichmann's heroic fight with the German language, which inevitably defeats him. It is funny when he speaks, Passam, of winged words, a German colloquialism for famous quotes from the classics, when he means stock phrases or slogans. Dimly aware of a defect that must have plagued him even in school, it amounted to a mild case of aphasia. He apologized, saying, "Officialese is my only language." But the point here is that officialese became his language because he was genuinely incapable of uttering a single sentence that was not a cliché. Was it these clichés that the psychiatrist thought so normal and desirable? Are these the positive ideas a clergyman hopes for in those whose souls he ministers? Eichmann's best opportunity to show this positive side of his character in Jerusalem came when the young police officer in charge of his mental and psychological well-being handed him Lolita for relaxation. After 2 days, Eichmann returned it, visibly indignant, quite an unwholesome book. To be sure, the judges were right when they finally told the accused that all he had said was empty talk, except that they thought the emptiness was feigned, that the accused wished to cover up other thoughts which, though hideous, were not empty. This supposition seems refuted by the striking consistency with which Eichmann, despite his rather bad memory, repeated word for word the same stock phrases and self-invented clichés. When he did succeed in constructing a sentence of his own, he repeated it until it became a cliché. Each time he referred to an incident or event of importance to him. Whether writing his memoirs in Argentina or in Jerusalem, whether speaking to the police examiner or to the court, what he said was always the same, expressed in the same words. The longer one listened to him, the more obvious it became that his inability to speak was closely connected with an inability to think, namely, to think from the standpoint of somebody else. No communication was possible with him, not because he lied, but because he was surrounded by the most reliable of all safeguards against the words and the presence of others, and hence against reality as such. The second reading is from the great poet of the Harlem Renaissance and of America, Langston Hughes, a poem entitled, "I Look at the World." I look at the world from awakening eyes in a black face, and this is what I see, this fenced-off narrow space assigned to me. I look then at the silly walls through dark eyes in a dark face, and this is what I know, that all these walls oppression builds will have to go. I look at my own body with eyes no longer blind, and I see that my own hands can make the world that's in my mind Then let us hurry, comrades, the road to find. Thus ends the readings. I invite you into the spirit of prayer and meditation, centering and reflection. Great Spirit of life and love, wondrous power of many names. We ask this morning that you turn us to deep compassion and love. Under our rage and our fear and our loneliness is the longing to connect in love. An evolutionary biologist will tell you it is ingrained in our being apes. We are social creatures who need one another to live and thrive. One who studies infants will tell you that they mimic the expressions they see in minutes of their birth. Smile for smile, distress for distress, laughter for laughter. A social scientist will tell you that what is beauty is human community and sharing, and what is ugly is injustice, a lack of empathy, and a failure to see one another as siblings. Spirit of love and life, enliven us with the spirit of love and compassion this day and every day. Amen.
Seeking meaning in uncertain days, flame of hope as our guide, challenging words, prophetic deeds, bearing witness that faith still abides. We dare to question, we choose to believe. We're searching for truth in our past and in lives that we lead. Though we may not find answers, our search will go on. Together we'll journey in love while we question as one. With adventurous spirits and minds, and with hearts full of care, wisdom of old, gifts of today, intermingling with lives that we share. We dare to question, we choose to believe. We're searching for truth in our past and in lives that we lead. Though we may not find answers, our search will go on.
Thank you, Tim. We'll miss you and we'll be glad when you're back. This is the second service in a series of sermons this month on how not to be evil. If you didn't watch last week, I hope you will, because I can't sum up how not to be evil in one sermon or even three. I'll say more about this next week. But friends, the spiritual work of living a mature, faithful, decent, and compassionate life is lifelong work. I've been preaching to you most weeks for 12 years, and we have talked about this over and over again, as we should. Because living well in complicated times is hard. I like Nikki's word, we get jumbled. So reflecting together, journeying together in love, as the anthem says, is important. How do we apply our values to this or to that? How do we reflect on those choices and learn from what works? What's eternal? And what needs to change? How can our ethical lives be stronger and more aligned and more inclusive? These are hard questions. This isn't just my topic this month, but every month, week in and week out, in some way or another. And this has been the topic for liberal religion for its entire history. In the early 1800s, our religious forebears made a radical argument at the time that we needed to apply the eternal lessons of love and reason and compassion and hope to their time, to our time, and not rely on the conclusions of people who lived and died a long time ago. Learn from their wisdom, yes, absolutely, but not crib their test results without thought or consideration. The idea was that the world was changing all the time, and yes, in 1805, as much as today. And so we needed to continuously reflect and learn and use our reason. In those years, in the early 1800s, our religious ancestors debated fiercely the moral issues of their day. A whole variety of questions around industrialization and changing society and this, that, and the other, but foremost among them was the brutal institution of slavery. Some of our forebears were radicals, like William Lloyd Garrison, who wanted to tear it all down now. Others were reformers who argued for gradualism and better laws and take every victory you could get on the journey toward abolition. And many, like Theodore Parker, minister in Boston, were both. They wanted the abolition of slavery, and they wanted it now, and they would also take any victory in that direction that they could get. So folks like this lobbied against the Fugitive Slave Act, and they also sent money to John Brown so he could buy guns for the raid on Harper's Ferry. These groups, the reformers and the radicals, fought with each other sometimes, disagreements about tactics, but not about the goal. There was another group, though, a third group of Unitarians, and really that group of Unitarians was more of an issue. This was the group that wasn't engaged at all. Wasn't thinking about it, wasn't concerned. Was going about their day, doing whatever. Many of the wealthiest Unitarians at the time owned textile mills in New England, and though they weren't slave owners, they made their money by turning cheap cotton into mid-priced goods for the world market. So they might as well have been. So the saying went that when it came for the church bells to ring for abolition, the Unitarian bells would not ring, for they were too stuffed with cotton. That's the saying. The truth is more complicated. The truth is that it depended on the congregation and the minister and the lay leaders and the context. Some bells did ring. Some did not. Some were awake and paying attention. Others, like much of the country, were asleep. What woke them up? Well, it was a lot of people speaking up. Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman put them first on the list, first and foremost on the list, people telling their own story of their own experience. A white woman, Harriet Beecher Stowe, wrote a book, The Lady Who Started the Civil War, Lincoln called her, but the truth is that she used her privilege as a famous author to get people to pay attention, to wake up. Was it perfect? God, no. It should not have taken her words to do that when Douglass and Tubman and Sojourner Truth and others had their own words. But the goal was to unstuff the ears, to wake the conscience, to wake the conscience, to enliven empathy, to get reason working, to question what was taken for granted. Once the questions began, once empathy awoke, a tipping point was reached, and public opinion having shifted, the asleep having become reformers, and some of the reformers becoming radicals, the South decided that rather than have slavery end by legislation, they would go to war to try to save it. The minister of this church at that time, Augustus Conant, enlisted in the Union Army and died in the war. And we could do a lot more about that history, about our history as a church and faith and nation, but the point I want to make here is this. Waking up is the first step. Empathy. Conscience. Conscience. To see what Langston Hughes calls the silly walls and know that they have to go, whether we look through his eyes or not, or we simply hear the words, question our assumptions that the wall is natural, and then join comrade in the journey. An essential component in how to not be evil is then to pay attention, to think, to question and wonder and be curious, to grow our empathetic heart, to wake now our conscience and our reason. Among all the things that white privilege is, or male privilege, or wealth privilege is, it is first an epistemological privilege, a shortage of knowledge, really. It is the privilege of being asleep. It is the possibility of going through the day without seeming to experience racism or sexism or other forms of oppression. I say seeming to because those things are all around us every day, but some can sleepwalk through them. So I'm a lot less interested in the fights between the radicals and the reformers than I am in figuring out how to wake people up. Because the work of resisting evil and making more good in the world needs many players, many instruments, and many playbooks. But it first needs folks who are awake enough to play and sing. It was the philosopher Hannah Arendt who made this notion so clear to the world. She published first a set of articles and then a book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, about Adolf Eichmann, a functionary in the Nazi regime who rose to be in charge of the transportation and logistics of the death camps, who fled and lived in hiding in Argentina after the war until he was captured and brought to trial in Israel. Arendt, a Jewish philosopher from Germany who had fled to the United States before the Second World War, covered the trial and wrestled for the rest of her career with Eichmann and the millions like him. Those who said they didn't hate the Jews, who had Jewish friends, and yet did nothing, or in his case, in Eichmann's case, played a critical role in the execution of 6 million human beings. Eichmann, she said, after observing him and reading his own writings, the transcripts of interviews and more, was incapable of original speech or thought. He did not think for himself. It went beyond he followed orders. It was more than that. He literally could not think in her meaning of the term. He could not consider the meaning of the phrases he repeated or the impact of what he was doing. And thus, she wrote, his life and his participation in such great horror, without malice or evil intent, revealed the utter banality of evil. He lacked, she argued, a conscience. In a later set of lectures, Arendt argues that this conscience and its absence is underconsidered as an ethical matter. Ethicists spend a lot of time thinking about what is the right action to take, but you first have to be concerned about taking right action, to question and to wonder. Conscience, she reminds us, means literally with thinking, science, with thinking, to think with others, to engage in reasoning together. She too was less worried about the disputes between people of conscience who might disagree about some things or tactics, or who even might make mistakes. She noted that a person whose conscience was troubled, who regrets their mistakes and worries if they did the right thing, is far more ethically sound than the person who is never troubled by their conscience, who is convinced of their innocence, their goodness, and their righteousness, without questioning any of their assumptions, or even considering the consequences of their actions. In Eichmann in Jerusalem, as well as in her book On Totalitarianism, she lays out the problem, the way in which the state closes down different ways to consider different ideas. Right? There's only one way of talking. The way that folks don't think for themselves. And first and foremost, she notes the lack of empathy, the vilification and demonization of any who disagree. In her later work, she discusses the remedy. She lays out the problem. Later, she says, what's the solution? How do we wake folks up? Others have worked on this problem too extensively. How do you break the barrier of banality and engage the conscience? And it's hard when there are so many things to distract us and delay us. Remember how I said I couldn't solve evil in one sermon? Can't solve this in one sermon either. This is a summary, an outline of a suggestion based in our values, our faith, and the best social and political science I can get my hands on. Here's how you do it. Start with love. Start always with love. I know it's tempting to skip this or to say, I can't love them, but that's not our theology. Our theology is that you start with respecting the dignity of every person, all of them. That is a huge challenge. Don't sell that short. That's a huge challenge. It's hard, but you start with love for them and for yourself and all people. If you want a religion that says some people are unworthy of love and respect, then you will have to choose a different one than this one, because that is not who we are. So you start there. And then that love and respect should lead to curiosity. Why are they that way? What do they care about? What matters to them? Who do they respect? What is going on in their heart? These are the kinds of questions that Nikki was asking in her testimony, and I think they're the right questions. Ask deeper, dig deeper. And you have to start where people are at. Now, let me say an important proviso here, that as I'm talking about this, I have a lot of love and respect for folks whose identities are much more marginalized than I am. They have more on the line. And this task that I'm laying out here, starting where people are at, that's not always their job. That's asking too much emotional work to be the accompanier on that journey of waking up. It is my job a lot of the time. It is the work of some of you, not all of you, but some of you. It's easier for some of us to wake up the sleeping than it is for others to do so. It is emotionally and physically safer. So for some of us, that is our work, but not for all of us. But no matter what, you start with love and figure out where they are. Trying to convince someone, move them along. What do they care about? Do they need a sports hero to convince them? They need facts and figures? Do they need a heart-to-heart story? Do they need to be heard about their own trauma first, and then moved to solidarity? Where are they at? And you also have to choose whether you want to be right or whether you want to bring people along. Sometimes you have to choose. Arendt, following Socrates, says that there are three metaphors for waking up the conscience: the gadfly, the stingray, and the midwife. The gadfly irritates. They rouse, they pester, they get you off your spot. The stingray freezes. They make you stop and consider before you go off into the next task. And the midwife brings to birth the new idea. They synthesize, they elucidate, they connect. What are you good at of those things? What skills do you need to be better at? Being able to do all three of those things, depending on the situation, can be very useful. Having only one tool doesn't always work as well. Sometimes you need to disrupt things, sometimes you need to support things that are happening, and sometimes you need to stop. Just stop and pause. Love everyone, meet them where they're at, use the right tools, and finally, in the work of waking yourself up and waking others up, practice relentless, humble curiosity. Look into your own heart and mind. What are you missing? What do you need to learn? Find mentors and guides to help you. I have them, and I ask them all the time about my struggles and doubts. I am reassured by Arendt's words that the troubled conscience is a sign of struggle, because mine is often troubled. I know I don't always get it right. Practice relentless, humble curiosity. What we learn from social change is that what changes hearts is stories, questions, and beauty. Stories, name the names, tell the stories, connect at a deep level. Questions make us wonder, and wonder can lead to empathy and connection. Do you hear? Do you hear? Through the throng, through the rush, do you hear? And beauty. Stories, questions, and beauty. Beauty attracts, it brings people into the new that is coming to birth. Beauty and joy matter for justice too. If we want to wake the conscience, we need to be nimble and thoughtful. We need to be gadflies sometimes, stingrays sometimes, and midwives sometimes. We need to be humble, curious, and loving, deeply loving. And we need to cast or share a vision of the beautiful land to which we are bound. Without a vision, a compelling vision of the better world, it will be hard to wake when the comfort of the bed works too well for too many. We need to offer something that is enticing enough to rouse up a journey to a better world, where there are no silly walls, where we respect what we see and feel and touch through our own eyes and skin and through the eyes and skin of others, where we do hear, through the rush and the roar. We hear the sighs and the tears, the hope and the joy. The land to which we are bound. Where all are seen as holy, free to live and love and become, where we are not sleepwalking, but dancing, learning, striving, building, and creating the world worthy of our praise and of our faith. None of what I've said about waking others is easy, and all of it applies to ourselves too. Because that's the other piece. Before we go waking others, we need to make sure our empathy is both wide and deep. We need to make sure that we are leading with our love and our hope, with our vision of that land, so that we can invite, pause, and help bring to birth that whose time has long come. So, friends, know that I love you, that you are sacred, that everyone is, and that we all have a role to play in the journey. We all have some waking to do, some work before us, and this is no time to sleep through the revolution. Let us cast a vision of a land where all are free, where joy is everywhere, where peace abides. And let us sing together. Tim will play and sing Come and Go With Me, an African-American spiritual, a song of that journey of peace and love, which we are invited to join. Let's sing together.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
Thank you, Tim. What a beautiful arrangement of such a powerful song. Our words for our benediction are from that Reverend Theodore Parker, who embraced the power of reform and the need for radical change. And he reminds us of our faith. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living. I see in the comments that some of you may have a little trouble with the stream for a little bit, but everything was recorded, and so you can go back and catch parts of the sermon you missed, or just, you heard what you heard, whatever works for you. And I do invite folks to join us for coffee hour in a few minutes at that Zoom meeting ID. It'd be lovely to see some of your faces. If you've got a chalice at home, you can extinguish it as we extinguish our chalice here at the church, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we are together again.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go our way in peace, wander as we may. Blessed is the path we take, may love guide us on our way.
Go in peace.